The wind moved like a ghost through the husks of burned-out cabins, rattling loose boards and stirring cinders that hadn't held heat in weeks. The sky overhead was bruised, stretched with gray clouds swollen with storm. What used to be a frontier town was now just silence and smoke-stained bones. Only the blackened church bell remained standing, swinging gently in the breeze without a sound, its clapper melted in the fire. Jack Boon rode in slow, his horse's hooves crunching over charred glass and broken crockery. He said nothing, reins loose in one hand, the other resting near the worn handle of a Colt that hadn't been fired in months. He looked tired in a way that didn't come from travel. His shoulders bore the weight of something older than this war-torn prairie. Dust coated his coat like it belonged there, and behind his eyes lived the kind of emptiness only a grave could match. He dismounted when he reached the town square, what little was left of it. No sound but the low whine of wind between collapsed storefronts and scorched wood. He wasn't looking for anything. He didn't believe in rescue or mercy. He was just passing through, like a shadow that didn't want to be seen. Then it came, a sound so faint he nearly mistook it for the wind. "Mama." He turned, slow and careful. His eyes scanned the wreckage. "Mama?" It was a whisper, high and fragile, somewhere between dream and death. Jack's boots moved on instinct, crunching over debris until he reached a collapsed wagon, the canvas scorched and sagging over broken beams. He crouched low, careful not to disturb the heap too quickly. Underneath, wrapped in what was once a clean blanket, now streaked with ash, was a boy. Maybe 7, maybe 8. Thin like a matchstick, eyes wide but dull, face hollowed by hunger. He clutched something tightly to his chest, a cloth doll, missing a face. Jack reached a hand in but didn't touch. "You alive under there, son?" The boy blinked slowly, like his body had nearly forgotten how. "Can you find my mama?" His voice cracked like dry wood. Jack exhaled through his nose. The last thing he wanted was this. A child. A question with no answer. A promise he didn't have the right to make. "She told me to stay," the boy continued, voice brittle. "Said she'd come back, but the fire. I waited." Jack looked around. There were no signs of life, only scorched footprints, the faint memory of screams long faded. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Toby." He knelt fully now, pushing aside the splintered beams. The boy whimpered once, then let go. Jack lifted him gently, and the child barely weighed enough to stir the dust. Toby's skin was warm, not from health, but fever. His lips were cracked, his cheeks sunken. He'd gone days without food, maybe longer. "You got people nearby?" Jack asked, already knowing the answer. The boy shook his head once. Jack's jaw flexed. He was a man who'd walked away from too much. From orders, from blood, from graves he didn't dig. But the boy's fingers clung to him, now like vines desperate for something solid. And in his heat-sick whisper, there was no demand, no expectation, only faith. Dangerous, painful faith. "Promise me," Toby murmured again, eyes flickering with some last ember of hope. Jack looked away, past the husk of the general store, to the road that wound out into nothing. The storm was coming fast. "I can't promise I'll find her," Jack said low, "but I won't leave you behind." The boy nestled closer, his breath shallow. Jack mounted the horse again, pulling Toby gently in front of him, one arm securing the boy against his chest. The wind had changed. It was colder now, slicing through the air like sharpened bone. Behind them, the ghost town settled into silence again. Ahead, the prairie opened wide and empty. They rode. The clouds turned darker by the mile, swallowing the sun. The land grew less forgiving. A dry riverbed cracked beneath them as they passed, the bones of a deer bleaching on the banks. Toby stirred once, lifting his head weakly. "She had yellow ribbons," he whispered, "in her hair. Mama always wore 'em." Jack tightened his grip slightly. He didn't answer. The boy coughed then, deep and dry, like his lungs had forgotten how to move air. Jack pulled a canteen from his saddlebag and tilted it carefully. Toby sipped once, then closed his eyes again. A thunderclap rolled across the sky, distant but growing. Jack's eyes moved toward the horizon, a line of black clouds like a wall, curling and clawing toward them. He urged the horse faster, The terrain got rough, boulders and gnarled brush, wild pine trying to reclaim the earth. Jack looked for shelter, scanning the ridges and rock faces, but there was no cave, no cabin, not even a low cliff. Rain began to spit down in cold, hard drops. The wind screamed now. Toby shivered violently. Jack dismounted beneath a crooked old tree, its roots clawing over rock like they were trying to run. He wrapped Toby in a spare blanket and held him close, pressing his back against the trunk as lightning burst above them. Too close now. Thunder cracked again. The horse spooked and bolted a few feet before circling back. Jack shielded the boy's face with his coat, using his body like a wall. Rain soaked him through, chilling to the bone. His fingers went numb, but he didn't move. Toby whispered something again, so faint it was almost lost to the storm. "Mama." Jack closed his eyes. Images pushed up from places he thought buried. A woman. A child. Screams. Smoke. The long ride away from a burning house he'd once called home. He blinked hard, forcing it down. "You hold on, Toby," he muttered. "You don't let go." The boy didn't reply. The storm raged around them, lightning turning the plains into flashes of white fire. Wind clawed through the trees. The smell of rain and burnwood filled the air. For hours, Jack stayed there, holding a child that wasn't his, in a world that no longer offered second chances. When the storm finally began to drift east, and the clouds opened just enough to let moonlight spill across the grass, Jack looked down. Toby was breathing, barely, but alive. Jack stood slowly, muscles stiff, the boy still wrapped in his arms. He moved back toward the horse, whispering something in a language older than memory. A prayer maybe, or just a breath for courage. He lifted the boy again into the saddle, mounted behind him, and turned them west, where the last of the stormlight painted the sky in flickers of blue and gold. The prairie stretched on, wide and cruel, but Jack Boon rode into it, one hand on the reins, the other steadying the child, and the only sound for miles was the steady, broken whisper, "Mama." Dawn cracked open the cold, with a faint orange smear across the treetops. The fire hissed beneath the overhang, trying to hold back the chill that clung to the stones like a second skin. Jack crouched beside the flame, hands wrapped around a battered tin cup as water inside barely came to a boil. His coat was still damp from the storm 2 nights prior, his breath curling like smoke in the morning air. Toby lay curled under layers too thin for mountain nights, his fever making him twitch in his sleep. Jack had wrapped his own coat around the boy before the fire went out, leaving himself to shiver in the gray quiet. He didn't complain. There were bigger problems than cold fingers. From somewhere beyond the ridge, hidden in pine shadow and mist, eyes watched them. Naoka barely made a sound. His face was streaked with ochre and ash, the long braid down his back tied with bones of animals no white man could name. He crouched low on a flat rock above the camp, unmoving, as much a part of the forest as the moss beneath him. He watched the man tend to the boy, saw the tenderness in each movement, the weariness in the cowboy's shoulders. His eyes narrowed. Then he disappeared like smoke. Days passed. The trail bent through dead creeks and hollow valleys, and the world gave no kindness. Jack's hands grew raw from work, skinning rabbits, breaking thorns from tangled fur, cooking with nothing but salt and old habit. Toby tried to eat, but his stomach was slow to trust food again. He sipped broth like it might vanish if he looked away. Jack didn't speak much. The silence between him and the boy was made of something sturdy, like wood too weathered to break. Toby followed without complaint, though his steps grew slower each mile. One night, Jack pulled a thorn from his side, a shallow wound he'd ignored too long. Blood ran thick and dark. He sewed it shut with trembling fingers, biting down on a stick as the needle dug flesh. Toby watched from the corner of the campfire, small eyes full of worry, but said nothing. In the mornings, Jack would find strange things. Stones arranged like arrows near the trail. Meat hanging on thin branches, skinned and gutted, ready to cook. Not animals' tracks, but human. Jack's instincts didn't like it, but something deeper told him it wasn't a threat. The feeling came to a head when the horses began to act skittish one afternoon on the ridge. Jack turned in his saddle, eyes scanning the scrubland behind them. 3 riders kicked up dust far below. Dirty men, sunburned and wild-eyed, wearing what remained of Union coats and Confederate pistols. Bandits, deserters, men who no longer believed in flags. "That's Boon," one of them barked. "Used to be a lawman. The one who killed them cavalrymen down south." Another spat. "He's got a kid with him. Could be worth something." They rode harder. Jack saw the glint of steel flash in the sun and knew the kind of men they were before they even raised their guns. He snapped the reins and galloped down into the canyon, ducking low with Toby clutched against him. Bullets screamed past Rock. One struck the saddle horn, sending splinters into Jack's leg. He didn't slow. At the bend, he dismounted fast, shoved Toby down behind a rotting log, and turned to fire back. "Stay down, boy," he shouted, revolver barking twice. One shot found bark, the other tore into a saddlebag far behind. He was outnumbered, 3-1, for bullets left. The riders closed in fast. Then a high, shrill whistle cut through the canyon. One of the deserters jerked in the saddle, eyes wide, and toppled. An arrow buried deep in his throat. Blood sprayed like paint across his chest. Another screamed. His horse reared, but before he could recover, a figure emerged from behind the rock. Naoka. He moved like wind made solid, blade glinting. He slashed across the man's belly, sending him tumbling backward. The third man turned to run. Jack's last bullet caught him in the back, sending him tumbling from the saddle like a bag of wheat. Silence returned, hot and brutal. Naoka stood tall, breathing even, spear dripping blood. Jack rose slowly. He looked at the tracker, then at the corpses. "Didn't ask for help," he muttered. Naoka tilted his head, expression unreadable. "Didn't wait for you to ask." Toby peeked from behind the log, staring at the painted man like he was watching a story come to life. That night, they camped near a waterfall that sang low and sweet. Toby slept again, wrapped tighter than before. Jack sat by the fire, arms crossed, watching Naoka from across the flames. The tracker sat quietly, sharpening a blade that looked handmade. Neither man spoke for a long while. Finally, Jack broke the silence. "Why were you helping us?" Naoka didn't answer immediately. His eyes lifted to the firelight. From a pouch on his belt, he pulled something and set it on the ground between them. A shawl. Torn, the edge stained with dried blood. Jack's chest went still. He reached forward slowly, fingers trembling just enough to betray him. He turned the cloth in his hands. Yellow thread along the seam. Smudged hand embroidery, small flowers. It was delicate, once beautiful. "Where'd you find that?" he asked, voice low. Naoka didn't blink. "Near the river crossing. 2 nights passed. Woman taken by white men." Jack swallowed. The taste in his mouth turned metallic. "Alive." Naoka didn't answer. Jack looked over his shoulder at Toby, who slept beneath a thick layer of blankets, one hand curled into a fist around that damn cloth doll. "Mama," the boy murmured in his sleep. Jack turned away quickly, eyes burning. He folded the shawl slowly and tucked it into his saddlebag, without a word. Neither man spoke again that night. The fire burned down to coals, and in the cold, heavy silence of the dark, 3 souls shared the weight of the trail, one too young to carry it, one too tired to lay it down, and one too quiet to ever let it show. Smoke curled from a dozen fires, like black fingers clawing at the sky. The refugee camp below had once been a sanctuary for the lost, displaced families, war-wounded drifters, widows and orphans. Now it was something else. The air stank of sweat, rot, and fear. Campfires burned too bright and too wide, not for warmth, but for control. Shadows moved among the tents, armed men with cruel mouths and louder guns, their laughter sharp as knives. Every corner of the place breathed menace. Jack lay belly down in the tall grass, just beyond the last ridge, boots pressed deep into the mud, eyes scanning the chaos through a gap in the brush. Beside him, Naoka didn't move at all, barely breathing. Behind him, curled like a ghost in a blanket, Toby waited. Jack's revolver sat heavy in his hand, cylinder open. He counted again. 3 bullets. "This where she is?" he asked, voice a breath. Naoka nodded once. Jack looked at the boy, then to the fires below. "You don't owe me this." Naoko's gaze didn't move from the camp. Not for you. Then they slipped into the dark. They crept like shadows between tents, through the stench of boiled beans and spilled blood, avoiding the drunken banter of the bandits and the muffled cries of the imprisoned. A guard passed within feet of them, dragging a stolen blanket, humming a song no child should hear. Jack's knife was already in his hand when the man turned. One quick motion. A gurgle. The guard dropped without a sound. Naoko was gone before the body hit the ground. Gunfire cracked from deeper in the camp, screams tearing the air in half. Jack moved fast, pressing through smoke and canvas, his wounded leg threatening to buckle. Another guard emerged, too slow. Naoko's blade flashed, and the man fell in two motions, one for the breath, the other for the silence. A woman screamed. Jack turned his head toward it. The sound pierced through everything. He limped toward the source, ignoring the heat that bloomed in his side. Blood trickled beneath his shirt. He kicked down a wooden door, barely holding its hinges. Inside, tied to a post in a dim, filthy shack, was Marina. Her face was pale, swollen, and cracked with dried blood. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of the crash, and for a moment, she looked as if death had already taken her. Then she blinked. "Toby?" she whispered, voice little more than breath. Jack rushed forward, slicing her bindings with shaking hands. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed into his arms like a broken reed. He held her there for a long second, just breathing, feeling the fragile beat of her heart against his chest. "Hold on," he said quietly. "He's here. He's safe." Her fingers dug into his shirt. Outside, more shouting, more gunshots. But Jack only saw her. He half carried her out of the shack, his shoulder taking most of her weight. Smoke curled through the sky now. A tent had caught fire. One of the bandits ran screaming into the night, arrows in his thigh. Then Toby saw her. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He ran. His small legs thundered over the broken ground, bare feet thudding against rock. Marina lifted her head, her eyes wide and wet. "My baby," she gasped, voice trembling. Toby collided into her chest, arms clutching tight, face pressed against her heart. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, sobbing now. My baby, my baby." Jack stepped back to give them space, his hand still stained with blood. His breathing was ragged, but he smiled, just barely. Then Marina coughed. Hard. The sound of it didn't belong to the living. She bent over slightly, her shoulders shaking. Blood hit the ground like black ink. Jack rushed forward, caught her just before she collapsed. "She needs a doctor now," he barked, turning toward Naoka, who stood watching from a shadow near the burning tent. Naoka didn't move. His face didn't change. He slowly shook his head. Jack's stomach dropped. "No," he said. "No. She just needs time. Water. Rest." But he saw it now. The bruising in her chest. The glassy shimmer in her eyes. Marlena didn't have time. She knew it too. "I waited," she whispered, holding Toby close. "Waited every night." Toby clung to her. His little hands shook. "Don't go, Mama. Please. I wanted to see you," she said, lips trembling. "Just one last time." "And I did." Her hand slid from his cheek. She closed her eyes and didn't open them again. The wind slowed. The fire hissed. Somewhere in the dark, one of the last bandits screamed and fell silent. Toby didn't cry. He simply lay there, forehead against her chest, waiting for something that wouldn't come. Jack stood frozen, fists clenched, breath trapped in his throat. It was all too quiet now. Naoka vanished sometime before sunrise. When the sky began to lighten, Jack found himself kneeling on a hillside of wild grass, digging a shallow grave with a broken piece of wood. Toby helped, hands dirty, face pale. No one spoke. They laid Marlena to rest in her shawl, the yellow embroidery catching the first light of dawn. Jack found a branch, carved it into a simple cross, and planted it firm at the head of the grave. Toby sat beside it, small hands folded in his lap. The wind moved his hair gently, the way a mother would with her fingers. "She waited for me," he whispered. Jack knelt down beside him. "She held on," he said softly, "just to see you one last time." Toby looked up at him, eyes red but dry. "What now?" he asked. Jack stared out over the hills, where the grass shimmered in gold, where the storm had passed and the world looked, for a brief moment, new again. He placed a steady hand on the boy's back. "You're not alone anymore." The boy leaned against him. Neither of them moved for a long, long while. In a land that forgot mercy, one man remembered his soul. If this story moved you, if you believe that no child should be left behind, no mother forgotten, then help us keep telling these stories. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs hope. And subscribe for more tales of courage, grief, and redemption. Because sometimes all it takes is one promise in the dark to change everything. Fade out.